What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I want to ask you guys a question, man. It's something that I've been wrestling with in my head like the last couple of years. I don't think I've done a video about this, so in this time where there's really no NBA, this is the time to be kind of like doing these type of videos. And the question is like, do you think that Mark Jackson is a Hall of Famer? As a matter of fact, after I do this video and upload it, I'm going to put this in the community post as well, like as far as opinion poll. Like, because I wrestle with this now. Like, if you asked me when he retired back in 2004, I would have said no. And if you would have asked me just 7, 8 years ago, I would have said no. But the reason why I bring it up again is because the bar has been lowered so much for the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And some of the players that people are suggesting should be in the Hall of Fame, you know what I'm saying? I'm really having to reassess certain shit. Like, you know, some people feel like, and it's just me, even though he did score 20,000 points in his career, I don't think Joe Johnson's a Hall of Famer. But there's some people who feel like that Joe Johnson should be in the Hall of Fame. I've always saw Joe Johnson as a solid number 2 option type player at his best. He had that 1 year where he played really hard and really well to get that contract when he averaged 25 points a game. And I thought that was going to be his breakout year. And I thought after that he would average more like 26, 27, but he dropped right back down to 20 points a game. I don't know, man. I just don't see him as a Hall of Famer. But if he's going to be in the Hall of Famer, and he who is not named anymore on this channel, if he is a Hall of Famer, then I got to reassess this Mark Jackson situation. Now, when you look at his numbers, they don't scream Hall of Fame. I think his career averages are 9.6 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 8 assists per game. They don't scream Hall of Fame. He wasn't a great scorer. He wasn't a great rebounder. He wasn't a particularly great shooter, though he did improve on the consistency of his outside shots as he got older. And he did have some seasons where he shot it very well on a percentage basis. But he didn't shoot a lot of them. Pretty good foul shooter. I want to say he was somewhere between 73 to 77%, I guess, off the top of my head. I remember always seeing him shooting somewhere in the mid-70s. So he was an average foul shooter. What I remember about him, though, and he was slow. That was the biggest knock on Mark Jackson. Is he was slow. He wasn't flashy. Okay. But what he excelled at was his high basketball IQ. He had a really good post game for a point guard. He was strong. He was 6'1", 180. But you guys see how he's built now? Like, he's a big boy. You know? Like in this picture, he was 180. But he was big. He was sturdy. He wasn't a smallish 180 like Isaiah Thomas. He was a sturdy 180, stocky. Strong. He could score on the post. He had a post game, like I said. And that used to cause problems, especially when he was matched up with smaller or weaker guards. And when he had the right team around him, as far as being on a talented team, that's when you saw the passing ability, his ability to read the floor, and he was also a really good defensive player. A lockdown defensive player, no. But what I remember about him was that he had really good hands, like as far as being disruptive, and he was really good at getting steals and knocking the ball out. Like if you weren't careful with your dribble, Mark Jackson would bat it. Like he would, he would knock it. Like he wouldn't like swat out of bounds, but he would sort of, and if he saw a teammate, he would knock it towards them. You know what I'm saying? He would knock it towards them, and they could catch the dribble, or maybe Mark Jackson could just catch the dribble. Or if nobody got the possession, your whole offense is fucked up, and you get a fucking 24-second shot clock violation. That's what I remember about Mark Jackson. If y'all remember Mark Jackson, y'all know what I'm talking about. I just remember from the Bulls playing him, especially in that '98 series. As the series went on, I remember like starting to hate Mark Jackson, man. I'm like, this motherfucker, man. Then all of a sudden he started making threes and shit with that ugly ass release he had. Remember that like high ugly release he had? It's almost like his release was like remember like when a ballerina is like on her tippy toes and she got like her hands just still in the air, and like her hands are like her arms are together, and she got her like hands together but they're like apart a little bit. That's his fucking release, man. That ugly shit, man. But it was going in. But yeah, Mark Jackson, man, he's a hard case, man, because I can see either way. I can see an argument for him and an argument against him. He was Rookie of the Year. His rookie year, he averaged, I think, 10 points, 6 points. Let's see the numbers off the top of my head. Let me see. Can't remember off the top of my head anymore. Let's see what Mark Jackson averaged for his rookie year. He averaged, 13.6 points, 4.8 rebounds, 10.6 assists, 2.5 steals. Okay? On 43% shooting from the floor. Now, if Lonzo Ball had averaged 10 assists per game his rookie year, you wouldn't have really heard nobody complain about him. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't have heard me or Ticket anybody complain about him. Because if you're a pass first point guard, if you average that, then shit, what you gonna average when you hit your prime? What type of numbers you can be putting up when you're in your absolute best? So, Mark Jackson won Rookie of the Year, so that's on his resume. He was only an All-Star one time, which was his next year. You know what I'm saying? The most points he ever averaged in a season was 16. But he was, like John Stockton, a pass first point guard. Unfortunately, unlike John Stockton, Mark Jackson was never benefited to play with a guy who was tailor-made for his style like that. Like Stockton and Malone are like peanut butter and jelly. Pat Ewing, he wasn't really made for transition type shit, man. Like one thing I remember about Patrick Ewing too, he kind of had smallish hands, and Pat Ewing was prone, if you didn't really get him the ball when he really was anticipating it, he was prone to turn the ball over. So I don't think Mark Jackson was a great fit for the Knicks overall and what they were trying to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, a pass first point guard with that Knicks team wasn't the best fit. You know what I'm saying? That's why ultimately they wound up with a guy like Derek Harper, who could also shoot. You know what I'm saying? But one thing about Mark Jackson that I'll say, his best case is his passing ability and the numbers he put up. 10,334 career assists. He retired as second all time in assists when he retired. That was the biggest push for him. He was second all time. Now, since then, Jason Kidd passed him. He's second all time. And Steve Nash made it his business to pass Mark Jackson, passing him by one fucking assist. So he made it his business to pass Mark Jackson. So Mark Jackson is now fourth all time in assists. And I don't know, man. It's like I remember him being a better player and a more impactful player than his numbers. Like, yeah, he might have a game where he only had 11 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals. But if you watch the game, he was a lot more impactful than that. Especially with, I remember how he dominated sometimes when it came to the Bulls. You know, like one thing we lacked was a real point guard. You know, we really didn't have a point guard. And poor Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, that's what irritates me when people sit there and they bring up Steve Kerr as if he's this goddamn great player. Steve Kerr caught hell in '98. You understand me? Because when you think about it, right, that playoff run, Steve Kerr had to contend with when he was at the point guard position, because sometimes he played the off guard, depending on who was out there. But if Mike was out there, Steve was at the 2, at the 1. He had to contend with, during that playoff run, Sam Cassell, right? He had to contend with Sam Cassell. Then the next round, he had to contend with Muggsy Bogues. Then he had to contend with Mark Jackson. Then John Stockton. Stevie Kerr caught hell that year. If you watch the playoffs that year, it was so many different times when if he wasn't hitting his threes, he was like a liability out there, and Phil would bench his ass and put Ron Harper out there, and be like, hey, we just got to go a defensive angle with this one this time, man. Like Steve, you're not hitting your shots. Just get your ass out the game. Oh, Coach Nick Nolte. But I always swear Phil Jackson sound like Nick Nolte for 48 Hours and shit. Oh god. Listen here, watermelon. Oh boy. But nah, in all seriousness though, man. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. I know Karl Malone said during Mark Jackson's last year that he thought that he was a Hall of Famer, just based on his career achievements, like the numbers and the consistency. At the time, I was like, nah, I don't see a Hall of Fame player. Like, when I see a Hall of Fame player, I see someone who really dominated their position. Okay, and this is the argument against Mark Jackson, right? And this is kind of a hard one to overcome. Really, when you think of a Hall of Famer, right, you think of a guy who dominated, or at least was one of the most dominant players at his position for a minute, like preferably a decade, but at least 6, 7, 8 years. You know what I'm saying? Like dominated his position. And when you look at it from 1986 to 2000, just go that time period. Was he ever really one of the top point guards? Like when it comes to mind, like you think from 86, right, or 87, whatever year it was. I think it was 86, 87. You think of the best point guards at the time. You think of, you think of Magic, of course. You think of Isaiah. But yet you would still put other guys ahead of him, like Dennis Johnson. You know what I'm saying? There are other point guards that you would put ahead of Mark Jackson. And then later on, of course, Tim Hardaway, and Kevin Johnson, Mark Price. I don't know if I could put. Matter of fact, Mark Price is another one that I don't think is in the Hall, if I'm not mistaken. And Mark Price has a better case for it. You know what I'm saying? So that I'm really thinking about it even deeper now. It's hard, man. Like, the assist numbers are phenomenal. They are. They're the product of playing almost 1,300 career games. You know what I'm saying? He kind of reminds me of the Robert Parrish thing. Like, Robert Parrish scored 23,000 points in his career. That's a lot of points. And don't get me wrong, I think Robert Parrish is a Hall of Famer, but he did benefit from playing in 1,611 fucking games. He did benefit from playing more games than any other player in NBA history. Look, this is the argument I try to make to some people. I could be the most dominant player of all time. I could come into the league averaging 30, right? 30 points a game. I could come into the league averaging 30. I could have a 40-point season. I could just be torching people like the greatest score you ever seen. Then my fourth season in the league, I tear my Achilles. Okay? Now, I'm never the same player. I come back 1 year, tear it again, don't really produce, come back, have another fucked up injury, and that's a wrap. So I've had 4 solid years, okay, where I averaged 36 points a game. Let's say, for the sake of argument, I play every game those years. And I averaged 36 points a game. So that's 11,808 points. But then the next couple of years, I played maybe 27 games total, and only averaged like 16 points. Right? I'm just struggling. So let's just say I scored 12,000 points, right? Meanwhile, another guy is very consistent. Not a superstar, but he's very, very consistent. Always giving you between 15 to 17 points a night. Third option type guy. But he's dependable, great shooter. Fortunate to play on one championship team, but he wasn't the main guy. Okay. And he played a record 23 NBA seasons. Let's say he averaged 78 games a night. So he smashes Robert Parrish's record. He plays in 1,794 games. He averages, let's say you include some down years. He averages 13 points, let's say he averages 14 points a game for his career. But he scores 25,000 points. People are going to say he's a Hall of Famer. He had 25,000 points. Man, this dude never averaged 20. He never even averaged 18 points a game. But the numbers. He's ahead of Barkley, and he's ahead of Patrick Ewing, and he's ahead of Iverson. Man, he's not better than them. See, that's how you get into these arguments. That's the Mark Jackson conundrum. You see what I'm saying? He was fortunate to play a lot of fucking games. He accumulated a lot of stats. But was he really a Hall of Famer? And now I'm thinking about it again. I just can't put him in the Hall of Fame. He was a great coach. Okay? What he did for the Warriors, set the blueprint for what they are today. Great coach. He deserves another chance to being a coach. Now, maybe as a coach, that could be his angle. Or maybe as a broadcaster. You know, there's different ways of being in the Hall of Fame. Ultimately, I think Mark Jackson will be in the Hall of Fame. Even if it's a combination of his NBA career and coaching career and broadcasting career. He'll get in there some type of way. All right? Off the strength of something. But as a basketball player, I don't know, man. I don't know about that one. But tell me what you guys think, man.